Mr. Burzine Waghmar as our first panelist, as introductions have already been made, and of course he's linked with RUSI, an organization which I consider a center of excellence. So we look forward to your intervention, Mr. Burzine. Thank you. You are muted, Mr. Burzine. You are muted.
Very much, General Hasnain. Thank you, Oceanus Foundation, and a very good afternoon from England to one and all. I don't know about interventions, General. I leave that to you and the battlefield. My sort tend to be the armchair civvies that you like to deride, and quite rightly so. I accede to one of the forces men when he says that. I will come to this, it's my approach, not so much an intervention as an Orientalist and as a historian, because facts as usual are the first casualty, and in the 10-minute compass I have allotted to me very kindly, I shall be maybe acting as a forces man and bombarding with certain salient facts. So let's start with this, Mr. Pandya and other guests. Jinnah made 3 visits, 26, 36 and 44 to Jammu and Kashmir. On all 3 visits, he was not interested in liaising with the Muslim Conference, which was the local party on the ground and antagonist to the Abdullah's National Conference. And at no point did he seek a rapprochement, as he did across other British India provinces, where the Muslim League was building a critical mass of opinion in order to gain traction for the Pakistan movement. You could say that he did not want to invite Hari Singh's ayah as something of a reactionary monarch, true, but at the same time, he did not actively pursue this. So one is left wondering as a historian why, especially on his last visit in 44, he could not even seek a rapprochement between the All India Muslim League and the Muslim Conference. Number 2, Mountbatten arrived in Lahore on 2nd November 1947 and offered Jinnah a plebiscite, one Governor General to another, in order to avoid an inter-dominion war, as you rightly know. Jinnah refused. So the next time Pakistanis bang on about plebiscite, please remind them of the Quaid-e-Azam, who in November 47 outright rejected one. Point number 3, and there is something in the intervening decade, but I want to jump to Article 370 because that is the fulcrum of our conversation. Nehru on 27th November 1963 mentioned in the Lok Sabha that it is, quote, a part of certain transitional provisional arrangements. It is not a permanent part of the Constitution. It is a part so long as it remains so, close quote. So this idea that it has to be effected in perpetuum, in infinity, is sheer nonsense, as the parliamentary record amply attests. Coming back again now, back to 48. Jinnah, as I said, rejected plebiscite. Then what happened? Sir Owen Dixon of the UN Commission rightly pointed out, as he did, and this is where it becomes uncomfortable for Pakistan, quote, I was prepared to adopt this view that when the frontier of the state of Jammu and Kashmir was crossed on, I believe, 20th October 47 by hostile elements, it was contrary to international law, and that when in May 48, as I believe, units of the regular Pakistani forces moved into the territory of the state, that too was inconsistent with international law, close quote. And that May 48 bit is actually the nub of the issue, given the UN Resolution 47 of the preceding month, April 48, when Sir Zafrullah Khan, Pakistan's first and only Ahmadi permanent representative to the General Assembly and Security Council, let the cat inadvertently out of the bag when he mentioned to the Security Council that, well, it's not just the Azad Kashmir forces who are in operation, but there are 3 brigades of the Pakistan Army too. The Security Council was not a little disquieted and did ask Sir Zafrullah for clarification from Karachi that this is May 48. And Sir Zafrullah, you never thought it necessary to mention to the Security Council and General Assembly in all these ensuing months that there are units of the Royal Pakistan Army, a Dominion force, actually imbricated with Azad irregular forces or freedom fighters, as you would have us believe. And that was, shall we say, the first uncomfortable moment for Pakistan, because they had to admit. And of course, Sir Zafrullah Khan went on to admit that ground situation has changed, and you can understand that there's chaos, and this is what happens in a belligerent situation, and all of that. Well, so much for that. And then what happened? On 30th April 48, Pakistan rejected a plebiscite when Nehru again was willing to review it as such. By this time, the UN was, with sheer goodwill, also willing to do regional plebiscites, Mr. Pandya. But Pakistan said, no, we must have an entire plebiscite of the entire erstwhile kingdom of Jammu and Kashmir. And then Pakistan flip-flopped, which it always does. That's its signature modus operandi. And then it said, well, we are willing to have partition and parcel out the valley, and the rest can be decided subsequently. But partition of the erstwhile kingdom was never on decks. It was, as Pakistan maintained robustly, either a plebiscite or not. So now it was willing to flip-flop and say we can have a partition. And then by this time, of course, as we know, or everyone ought to know, there was the famous, if not notorious, April 49 secret agreement in Karachi with Sardar Ibrahim Khan of the Azad Kashmir forces, by which the Azad Kashmir government in itself dissolved and devolved authority to the Pakistan government. Of course, there were forged signatures on that, and Sardar Ibrahim mentions in his memoirs about this, that this was not what was arranged, but of course, Pakistan took over the entire situation. Again, Pakistan kept this wrapped for decades, until Sardar Ibrahim's memoirs came out decades later as such. And it is interesting that this was again dismissed in May 50 by Pakistan, and the so-called Article 317 plebiscite, as General Hasnain pointed out, was never mentioned by Pakistan in UN Resolution 211 after the 65 war, UN Resolution 307 after the 71 war, and after the similar agreement of 72. And of course, as I said, we come back full circle with Jinnah outright rejecting a plebiscite on 2nd November 47. What was the basic nub? And I conclude here, Mr. Pandya. Pakistan had to vacate its forces. Demilitarization had to take place in the western sector of the kingdom, which it had occupied and annexed. And that was what fell in its lap after the chaos of the Poonch uprising and the war, which started in October 47. And according to the UN, and the platform for plebiscite that was laid out, which Joseph Goebel, the late Madeleine Albright's father, and Condoleezza Rice's PhD supervisor, mentioned to Nehru, Pakistan has no locus standi in the actual conduct of the plebiscite should that situation occur and it were to be executed. Much to its chagrin, of course, it could not. And also, because it refused to remove its troops, the UN made it clear that a certain quantum of Indian troops had to stay in the valley when the plebiscite would occur, because law and order and basic administrative measures have to be in place, which of course Pakistan refused to accept. And it is because of this that I finish now with the principle of international law, Mr. Pandya, which is rebus sic stantibus in Latin, as things stand, according to which India, as the original party, is exonerated from its obligation, that is, the plebiscite, under an international undertaking, if there is a vital change in the circumstances existing at the time the obligation was undertaken. Since material circumstances changed, Pakistan's annexation of the western sector, Pakistan's refusal to remove its troops, demobilized for the actual plebiscite to take place, the issue is a dead letter. And international law sides with India every time jibes are preferred at it of why can't you offer a plebiscite if you claim to be the world's largest democracy and an accountable polity at that. International law stands in India's favor. Rebus sic stantibus. Circumstances have changed because circumstances have been manipulated on ground to change, that India has every right legally to rescind the initial offer of a plebiscite. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Waghmar. You really gave a historian's perspective. As expected, I'm from a historian of standing. Obviously, an excellent perspective. I'm glad you did not even come anywhere near 2019. You kept yourself very, very far from it. Thank you very much for that excellent rendering of the logic and the rationale behind it.